Claire Montgomery stormed into the maintenance hangar at dawn, her heels clicking sharply against concrete. Yesterday, her private helicopter had malfunctioned mid-flight engine failure that left her furious and grounded. Now the technician claimed it was fixed. "Who repaired it?" she demanded. A small voice answered from behind a toolbox. "My daddy did." Claire turned. A 6-year-old girl, with oil-stained hands, pointed across the hangar to a man in a janitor's uniform, quietly mopping the floor. Not an engineer, not a technician. Just the new custodian who'd started yesterday. Claire Montgomery was 34, sharp-edged and successful. She'd built her entertainment media company from the ground up, turning it into an industry powerhouse. Money had never been her problem, connection had. She kept people at arm's length, trusting spreadsheets more than smiles. But flying was different. In the cockpit of her personal helicopter, thousands of feet above the noise of business deals and board meetings, Claire found the only peace she knew. She'd earned her pilot's license in college, back when she still believed freedom meant going higher, faster, alone. Every weekend, she flew. It was ritual. It was escape. Ethan Walker was 37 and invisible. He wore the uniform of someone the world had learned to ignore: gray coveralls, work boots worn thin, a badge that read maintenance staff. He'd been hired just 24 hours ago, assigned to clean floors at the industrial complex where Claire kept her helicopter. His resume listed no college degree, no technical skills, just short-term jobs that painted the picture of a man barely surviving. But his hands told a different story. They were careful hands, steady hands, the kind that had once built intricate machines and solved impossible problems. Beside him, almost always, was Lily. 6 years old, wild brown curls, and a mind that ran faster than her small legs could carry her. She wasn't supposed to be here. Children weren't allowed in the maintenance facility, but Ethan had no choice. Daycare was expensive. Babysitters asked questions. So Lily came to work, clutching a worn notebook filled with drawings of gears, engines, and helicopters, sketched in careful detail. She sat quietly in corners, coloring diagrams of turbines while her father scrubbed floors. She never complained. She'd learned early that complaining changed nothing. Claire had noticed the girl yesterday, briefly, while arguing with mechanics about her helicopter. A small figure perched on a crate, watching everything with unnervingly intelligent eyes. Claire had dismissed her as some worker's kid, a distraction. She certainly hadn't noticed the man pushing the mop in the background. Why would she? People like Ethan were designed to be invisible. But now, standing in the hangar with early light cutting through high windows, Claire was noticing. She walked slowly toward Ethan. He didn't look up. He kept mopping, steady and methodical, as if he hadn't just been accused of something impossible. "You fixed my helicopter," Claire said. It wasn't a question. Ethan paused. "It was a simple calibration issue," he said quietly. "The fuel regulator was seated incorrectly. I adjusted it." His voice was flat, giving nothing away. Claire stared at him. Something about his face pulled at the edges of her memory like a song she'd heard years ago and couldn't quite place. Lily appeared at his side, tugging gently on his sleeve. "Daddy's really good at fixing things," she said proudly. "He taught me how engines work." Claire crouched down to the girl's level. "Did you help him?" Lily nodded seriously. "I held the flashlight, and I drew a picture of the rotor assembly so Daddy could check it later." She held up her notebook, showing a surprisingly accurate sketch of helicopter components. Claire's breath caught. This wasn't a child's scribble. This was technical drawing. Detailed. Precise. Impossible. For a 6-year-old. Unless someone had been teaching her for years. The previous day had been a disaster. Claire had taken the helicopter up alone, as she always did, climbing into clear blue sky above the city. For 20 minutes. Everything was perfect. The hum of the engine. The weightless feeling of flight. The world shrinking below into something manageable. Then the engine coughed. Once. Twice. Warning lights flashed red across the control panel. Claire's stomach dropped as the helicopter shuddered, losing altitude fast. She fought the controls, her pilot training kicking in through surging adrenaline. She managed to bring it down hard. In the maintenance facility's landing zone. Skids scraping concrete. The maintenance team swarmed the aircraft immediately, running diagnostics, pulling panels, muttering about sensor malfunctions and fuel system irregularities. They worked for 3 hours and found nothing conclusive. "We'll need to order parts," the head mechanic told her. "Could be a week, maybe 2. Claire had been furious. She'd stalked out of the hangar and spent the rest of the day in her downtown office, snapping at her assistant and canceling meetings. That evening, after everyone had gone home, Ethan had been making his final rounds. He wasn't supposed to be near the aircraft. His clearance was limited to floors and windows, but he'd overheard the mechanics talking earlier. Fuel regulator. Improper seating. They'd been looking in the wrong place, checking sensors when the problem was mechanical. Ethan had spent his life around engines. He knew their language, the way they whispered and complained when something was wrong. He paused near the helicopter, mop in hand, and listened. He should have walked away. It wasn't his job. It wasn't his place. But his hands remembered what his resume had forgotten. After checking that Lily was asleep on the cot in the break room, Ethan returned to the hangar. He worked by the light of a single overhead lamp, moving quickly and quietly. He found the fuel regulator exactly where he'd suspected misaligned, by maybe 3 millimeters, just enough to throw off the entire system. Ethan adjusted it with practiced precision, tested the connections, wiped away his fingerprints, and disappeared back into the shadows before dawn. Now, standing in morning light with Claire Montgomery staring at him like he was a puzzle she couldn't solve, Ethan felt the weight of his choices pressing down. He shouldn't have touched that helicopter. He should have stayed invisible. But some instincts ran deeper than caution. Claire's eyes narrowed. "I know you," she said suddenly. Ethan's jaw tightened. "I don't think so, ma'am." But Claire was already piecing it together, the shape of his face. Older now, but still familiar. The way he held himself, careful and precise. "You went to Riverside Tech," she said slowly. "Engineering program. You were 3 years ahead of me." Ethan said nothing. Claire felt a chill run through her. She remembered him now. Ethan Walker. The quiet genius everyone whispered about in labs and lecture halls. The student who'd solved problems that stumped tenured professors, who'd built a functioning jet engine prototype in his junior year using scrap metal and borrowed equipment. She'd been a freshman when he was a senior, and she'd watched him from across crowded classrooms. Fascinated by someone who seemed to understand machines the way other people understood language. "What happened to you?" Claire asked. And the question came out softer than she'd intended. Ethan picked up his mop again. "Life happened," he said simply. "I needed a job. You were kind enough to hire me. That's all there is to it." But Claire could see the lie in the set of his shoulders, in the way Lily reached up to hold his hand, protective despite her size. There was a story here. A long, painful story that had taken a brilliant engineer and turned him into a man who mopped floors to survive. Claire didn't ask Ethan directly. Instead, she did what she always did when she needed information. She called her assistant, Marcus, and asked him to run a background check. Discreetly, she emphasized. Marcus promised results. By end of day. The report arrived at 6 p.m. Ethan Walker, graduated summa cum laude from Riverside Technical University with a degree in mechanical engineering and a specialization in propulsion systems. He'd been offered positions at 3 major aerospace companies before graduation. He'd accepted one, a prestigious role at a defense contractor working on next-generation aircraft engines. His future had been golden, mapped out, and certain. And then, abruptly, he'd vanished. For 6 years, there was nothing but a gap in the public record. Then, 7 years ago, a birth certificate was filed. Lily Walker. Mother's name, Jennifer Costa. Father, Ethan Walker. But there was no marriage license, no custody agreement. After that, Ethan's employment history became a patchwork of short-term jobs, warehouse work, delivery driver, night security, custodial services. Never more than 8 months in one place. Never anything that used his degree or his skills. Claire closed the report and sat in the dark of her office for a long time. What had happened to him? What could break someone so completely that they'd walk away from everything they'd worked for? The next morning, Claire went back to the hangar. Ethan was there, running a buffer over the concrete floor. Lily sat nearby, coloring another drawing, this time a sketch of Claire's helicopter, accurate down to the registration number on the tail. Claire approached slowly. "I need to ask you something," she said. Ethan turned off the buffer. "Ma'am?" His voice was guarded. Claire gestured to Lily. "Your daughter. She's brilliant. Anyone can see that. Why isn't she in school? Why is she here?" Ethan's face went carefully blank. "School costs money. Daycare costs money. This way, she's safe, and I can keep an eye on her." It was a practical answer, delivered without emotion. But Claire saw the shame underneath it, the exhaustion of a father who was doing his best and knew it wasn't enough. "And you," Claire pressed gently. "You were one of the top engineering students in the country. You could be anywhere, doing anything. Why are you here, mopping my floors?" For a long moment, Ethan didn't answer. Then he looked at Lily, who was watching them with wide, worried eyes. "I made choices," he said, finally. "Some of them were mistakes, some of them weren't, but they led me here, and here is where I need to be." For her, he met Claire's gaze, and she saw something in his eyes that made her chest ache, resignation, mixed with fierce, stubborn love. He'd sacrificed everything for that little girl, his career, his dreams, his future. He'd burned it all down to keep her safe, and he didn't regret it. Claire nodded slowly. "I won't fire you," she said quietly. "And I won't tell anyone about the helicopter. But I need you to promise me something." Ethan waited. "If you see something else that's wrong with the helicopter, with any equipment, you tell me. Don't fix it yourself. Just tell me. Can you do that?" It took him a moment, but he nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Claire turned to leave, then paused. "And Ethan? Thank you. For fixing it. You probably saved my life." Over the following weeks, something shifted. Claire found reasons to visit the maintenance facility more often than necessary. She'd check on the helicopter, inspect the hangar, ask questions about safety protocols. And, somehow, inevitably, she'd end up talking to Ethan. At first, their conversations were brief and professional discussions about equipment maintenance, proper storage procedures, minor repairs. But gradually, they deepened. Lily was always there, a small presence sitting cross-legged on the floor with her notebook, listening to the adults talk. One afternoon, Claire noticed what the girl was drawing, a detailed cross-section of a helicopter transmission system, labeled in careful printed letters. "Did your father teach you that?" Claire asked, crouching down beside her. Lily nodded enthusiastically. "Daddy says girls can be engineers too. He says I can fix anything if I learn how it works." Claire felt something crack open inside her chest. "Your father is right," she said softly. "You can be anything you want, Lily. Don't let anyone tell you different." That evening, after Ethan had finished his shift, Claire did something impulsive. She invited them up to the building's rooftop terrace, a private space, usually reserved for executive meetings. She had coffee brought up, and juice for Lily, and they sat together, watching the sun set over the city. Ethan was uncomfortable at first, too aware of the gulf between his custodian's uniform and Claire's tailored business suit. But Claire had a way of putting people at ease when she wanted to. "Why helicopters?" Ethan asked eventually. Claire considered the question. "Control," she said finally. "In a helicopter, everything is in your hands. You rise, you fall, you move, it's all you. When I'm up there, nothing else matters. Not the company, not the pressure, not the expectations. It's just flight." She smiled faintly. "Probably sounds ridiculous." Ethan shook his head. "No. I get it. Engines were like that for me. Once. When I was working on a problem, everything else disappeared. It was just me and the machine, trying to understand each other." "What changed?" Claire asked gently. Ethan glanced at Lily, who was leaning against his side, half asleep. "She did," he said simply. "Jennifer, her mother, got pregnant during my last year of grad school. It wasn't planned. We weren't in love. But when Lily was born..." He paused, his throat working. Jennifer left 3 months later. Said she wasn't ready to be a mother. She signed away her parental rights and disappeared. I haven't heard from her since. Claire's chest tightened. So you raised Lily alone? Ethan nodded. The defense contractor job required 80-hour weeks, frequent travel, total commitment. I couldn't do that with an infant. So I quit. I found work that let me keep her with me, jobs with flexible hours, or night shifts, where she could sleep nearby. It wasn't glamorous, but she was safe, and she was mine, and that was enough. They sat in silence for a while, watching the city lights blink on. Claire realized she wasn't thinking about Ethan as the janitor anymore. She was thinking about him as the man she'd half admired from across campus years ago. Brilliant, focused, quietly, confident, and she was thinking about him as the father who'd given up everything for his daughter. "You're a good father," she said quietly. Ethan looked at her, surprised. "I'm doing my best." Claire smiled. "That's what makes you good." 2 weeks later, Claire made an offer. "Come flying with me," she said. "You and Lily. This Saturday. I'll show you what you fixed." Ethan hesitated. "I don't think." "Please," Claire interrupted. "Lily would love it. Wouldn't you, Lily?" The girl's eyes went wide. "Could I really go in the helicopter? For real?" Her voice was breathless with hope. Ethan looked at his daughter's face and felt his resistance crumble. "Okay," he said slowly. Saturday. Saturday arrived bright and clear. Claire met them at the hangar early. Lily was practically vibrating with excitement, bouncing on her toes, while Ethan helped Claire with the pre-flight inspection. Claire walked them through every step, explaining each check. She noticed that Ethan's hands moved with familiar confidence, that he caught details even she sometimes missed. "You've done this before," she said. Ethan shrugged. "Long time ago. I had a private pilot's license. Back in college. Let it lapse when Lily was born." They climbed into the helicopter, Claire in the pilot's seat, Ethan beside her, Lily strapped securely in the back. Claire handed the girl a child-sized headset. "Ready?" Claire asked, glancing back. Lily nodded so hard her curls bounced. Claire smiled and started the engine. The rotors began to turn, slowly at first, then faster, building until the whole aircraft vibrated with contained power. And then they were lifting, rising smooth and steady into the morning sky. Lily's gasp came through the headset, pure wonder. Below them, the city spread out in geometric patterns, streets and buildings, and parks arranging themselves into something beautiful from this height. Claire took them higher, heading out over the hills beyond the city, where the landscape opened up into rolling green dotted with oak trees. She kept the flight smooth and gentle. "Look down," she told the girl. "That's what birds see every day." They flew for an hour, tracing lazy circles over the countryside, Claire pointing out landmarks, while Lily asked 100 questions. Ethan answered the ones about how the helicopter worked, his explanations clear and patient. When they finally landed, Lily was still glowing. "That was the best thing ever," she declared, throwing her arms around Claire's waist in an impulsive hug. Claire, who wasn't used to being hugged by anyone, found herself hugging back. They went flying again the next weekend. And the weekend after that. It became a routine. Something all three of them looked forward to. Claire taught Ethan to handle the controls again, letting him take over for brief stretches. His skills came back quickly. Lily kept a logbook of their flights, noting altitude, weather conditions, and flight time with meticulous care. "I'm going to be a pilot when I grow up," she announced one day. "Just like you, Claire." On their 5th flight together, they landed in a meadow in the mountains, spreading out a picnic blanket. Lily ran through the tall grass while Ethan and Claire unpacked sandwiches. "She's happy," Ethan said quietly, watching his daughter. "I haven't seen her this happy in a long time." Claire bumped her shoulder against his. "What about you?" Ethan turned to look at her. "Yeah," he said slowly. "Me too." The accident happened on a Sunday in late autumn. The weather report had called for clear skies, but mountain weather was unpredictable. They'd been flying for 40 minutes when the clouds rolled in, thick, dark clouds that swallowed the peaks and turned the air gray and heavy. Claire frowned at the instruments. "We should head back." she said, already banking the helicopter into a turn. The wind hit them without warning, a vicious crosswind that slammed into the helicopter's side, tilting them sharply. Claire fought the controls, correcting for the gust, but another hit before she could stabilize, and then another, each one stronger than the last. The helicopter shuddered and spun, altitude dropping fast. Warning alarms shrieked in the cockpit. "Hold on!" Claire shouted. They were losing too much altitude too quickly. Claire could see trees rushing up, branches reaching like grasping fingers. She pulled back on the collective, trying to arrest their descent, but the wind was too strong. They were going down. "Brace for impact," she yelled. And then they hit. The helicopter crashed through the canopy, branches snapping, metal screaming. The impact threw them forward against their restraints. And then, mercifully, they stopped moving. For a moment, there was only silence, and the smell of aviation fuel. Then, Ethan's voice, hoarse and panicked. "Lily? Lily? Answer me!" Claire turned, dazed, to see Ethan ripping off his restraints and climbing into the back seat. Lily was slumped against her harness, eyes closed, a trickle of blood running down her temple. "She's breathing," Ethan said, his voice shaking. "But she's not waking up." Claire's pilot training kicked in. "We need to get out, now." The fuel tank could rupture. She forced her door open and half fell onto the forest floor. Her left arm screamed with pain. Ethan was already lifting Lily out, cradling her carefully against his chest. Claire could see now that the girl's leg was bent at a wrong angle, that there was too much blood soaking through her jeans. Broken femur. Internal. Bleeding. Possible. "Put her down here," Claire said, pulling off her jacket to make a cushion. Ethan lowered Lily onto it, his hands trembling. "We need to call for help." Claire was already dialing, but there was no signal. "We're going to have to hike out," she said. "Or I am. You stay with her." Ethan shook his head. "I'm not leaving her." Claire grabbed his shoulders, forcing him to look at her. "Ethan, listen to me. I can hike faster alone. I'll get to high ground, find a signal, call for rescue. You stay here with Lily. Keep pressure on that wound. Keep her warm. I'll be back, I promise." She didn't wait for him to argue. Claire took off running through the forest, ignoring the pain in her arm, her twisted ankle, the cuts on her face. She climbed, scrambling over fallen logs and through underbrush, fighting her way uphill until her lungs burned. Finally, on a rocky outcrop, her phone found one bar of signal. She called 911, gave their approximate coordinates, described Lily's injuries. The operator said rescue was on the way. Estimated time 45 minutes. Claire thanked her and ran back down. When she reached the crash site, Ethan was bent over Lily, talking to her in a low, steady voice even though the girl couldn't hear him. "You're going to be okay, baby. Help is coming. Just hold on." His face was wet with tears. Claire knelt beside him and pulled him into her arms. He collapsed against her, sobbing. "I can't lose her," he choked out. "She's everything." Claire held him tighter. "You won't lose her. I promise you won't. She's strong, just like her father." The rescue helicopter arrived 38 minutes later. Paramedics stabilized Lily, splinting her leg, starting an IV, loading her onto a stretcher. Ethan climbed into the medical helicopter with her, never letting go of her small hand. Claire followed in the second helicopter, watching the forest fall away beneath them. The hospital waiting room became Ethan's entire world. He sat in a plastic chair under fluorescent lights, still wearing his blood-stained shirt, waiting for news. Claire sat beside him, her injured arm in a sling, refusing to leave. Hours crawled by. Finally, a surgeon emerged. "Mr. Walker?" Ethan shot to his feet. The surgeon's face was carefully neutral. "Your daughter is stable. The femur fracture was clean. We've set it with a rod and pins. She'll heal completely." However, the surgeon paused. She lost significant blood, and there was swelling in her brain from the head trauma. We've induced a medical coma to let her body recover. The next 72 hours are critical. Ethan's legs went weak. Claire caught him, holding him upright. "Can I see her?" he asked. The surgeon nodded. They walked through sterile corridors to the pediatric ICU. Lily looked impossibly small in the hospital bed, tubes and wires connecting her to machines that beeped and hummed. Ethan pulled a chair close and took her hand. "I'm here, baby," he whispered. "Daddy's here." Claire stood in the doorway, giving them space. She watched Ethan break apart, watched him cry with his head on his daughter's bed, and she realized something that made her own eyes burn. She loved them, both of them. Somewhere between helicopter repairs and weekend flights and conversations on rooftop terraces, she'd fallen completely in love. She stepped into the room and placed her good hand on Ethan's shoulder. He looked up, his face devastated. "I did this," he said hoarsely. "This is my fault." Claire shook her head firmly. "No, this was an accident. A terrible accident. But Lily is a fighter, Ethan. She's going to come back to us." The first day passed. Then the second. Ethan never left Lily's side. Claire brought him food he didn't eat, coffee he barely touched. She talked to him about nothing and everything, anything, to fill the silence and keep hope alive. The doctors checked Lily constantly, monitoring brain activity, adjusting medications. They said the swelling was going down. But she didn't wake up. On the third day, Claire was dozing in a chair when Ethan made a sound half gasp, half sob. She jerked awake to see Lily's fingers twitching, her eyelids fluttering. "Lily?" Ethan leaned forward. "Baby, can you hear me?" Lily's eyes opened slowly, confused and unfocused. She looked at her father, and her cracked lips moved. "Daddy?" The single word was barely audible, but it was the most beautiful sound Ethan had ever heard. He pressed his forehead to hers, tears streaming down his face. "I'm here. I'm right here. You're okay." Claire hit the call button, and nurses flooded the room. They checked Lily's responses, asked simple questions. The girl answered slowly, clearly disoriented, but lucid. The head nurse smiled at Ethan. "She's back," she said gently. "Your daughter is going to be just fine." Recovery was slow. Lily spent 2 weeks in the hospital before being discharged with strict instructions. No weight on the injured leg for 6 weeks. Physical therapy 3 times a week. Ethan took a leave of absence. Claire arranged it personally and made sure he was paid throughout. She also arranged something else. She'd rented a furnished apartment near the hospital, spacious and accessible, and had their belongings moved there. When Ethan found out, he tried to refuse. "Claire, I can't accept this. It's too much." But Claire was firm. "You're not accepting charity, Ethan. You're accepting help from someone who cares about you. Let me do this, please." And because Ethan was exhausted and overwhelmed, he agreed. The apartment became a place of healing. Claire visited every day after work, bringing groceries, helping with Lily's physical therapy exercises, reading to the girl. She'd sit with Ethan in the evenings, sharing quiet conversations over takeout dinners. They talked about everything and nothing: his childhood dreams, her fears about running a company, the strange paths that had led them to this place. Slowly, Ethan's haunted look began to fade. Lily healed faster than expected. By week 4, she was using crutches, hobbling around with determination. "I want to draw the helicopter crash," she announced one day. Ethan and Claire exchanged worried glances, but they gave her paper and colored pencils. She drew everything. The storm, the trees, the moment of impact, and in the corner of every drawing, she put 3 figures: a man, a woman, and a little girl, all holding hands. One evening, when Lily was asleep, Claire and Ethan sat together on the apartment's small balcony. "I've been thinking," Ethan said slowly, "about what comes next. I can't go back to just being a janitor. I need to do more, be more." For her, Claire turned to look at him. "What do you want to do?" Ethan laughed quietly, bitterly. "What I've always wanted. Engineering. Design. Building things that matter. But that ship sailed a long time ago." Claire was quiet for a moment, then said carefully, What if someone already wants to hire you? What if I want to hire you? Ethan's head snapped up. Claire, she held up a hand. Hear me out. My company needs an equipment manager, someone to oversee maintenance of all our vehicles and technical equipment. It's not aerospace engineering, but it uses the same skill set, and it pays well. Ethan stared at her. Why are you doing this? He asked quietly. After everything, why would you do this for me? Claire reached out and took his hand. Because I care about you, she said simply. Both of you. Because watching you sacrifice everything for Lily made me realize what real strength looks like, and because. She hesitated, then forged ahead. Because I think maybe we could be good for each other. If you're willing to try. The words hung in the air between them. Ethan's throat worked. Claire, I'm a mess. I'm a single father, with a mountain of baggage. You deserve someone who has their act together. Claire laughed gently. Ethan, I'm a workaholic CEO who uses helicopters to run away from emotions and hasn't had a real relationship in 6 years. I think we're about equally messy. She squeezed his hand. I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm just asking if you want to see where this goes. Ethan looked at her and saw something that made his damaged heart skip. She was serious. She meant every word. This powerful woman, who could have anyone, wanted him. Wanted Lily too. Okay, he said, his voice rough. Okay. Let's see where this goes. Claire smiled, and it transformed her face. She leaned in and kissed him soft and careful. A promise rather than a demand. And Ethan kissed her back, letting himself hope for the first time in years. Lily's 7th birthday fell on a Saturday in spring, 3 months after the accident. She'd been cleared by her doctors, the cast removed. Her leg healed, except for a thin scar she wore with pride. It's my adventure mark, she told anyone who asked. Claire had insisted on planning the party, and she'd gone all out. They held it at the hangar decorated with streamers and balloons, with a huge cake shaped like a helicopter. Claire had invited children from the local elementary school and arranged for a helicopter tour company to give short rides. Lily was incandescent with joy, racing around, showing off the helicopter to her new friends. Ethan stood back, watching his daughter be simply, gloriously happy. You did this, he said to Claire. She shook her head. We did this. Together. She slipped her hand into his, and he held on tight. As the sun began to set and parents started collecting children, Ethan pulled Claire aside. I need to tell you something, he said. His voice was serious. Claire felt a flutter of worry. Okay? Ethan took a breath. I spent 6 years being afraid. Afraid I wasn't good enough to be the father Lily deserved. I gave up on everything else, because I was convinced that was what being a good parent meant: sacrifice and suffering. He paused. But watching her today, seeing her this happy, I realize I was wrong. Being a good parent doesn't mean giving up on yourself. It means building a life your child can be proud of. He turned back to her, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. You didn't just save Lily's life that day, Claire. You saved mine too. You reminded me who I used to be, who I could still be. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Claire's heart stopped. I know it's fast. I know it's crazy. But I spent 6 years running from everything good because I was afraid of losing it. I don't want to run anymore. I don't want to waste any more time being afraid. He opened the box. Inside was a simple ring, a thin band of gold with a small, perfect diamond. Will you marry me? Ethan asked. Will you be part of this weird, complicated, beautiful life we're building? Will you be Lily's mother? And my wife? And my co-pilot? In everything that comes next? His voice cracked. I love you, Claire. I want to spend the rest of my life proving that you were right to believe in me. Claire couldn't speak. Her hands were shaking, tears streaming down her face. She'd built her entire life around being independent, around needing no one. And here was this man offering her something she'd never known she wanted. A family. Yes, she managed finally. Yes, 1,000 times yes. She threw her arms around his neck and he lifted her off the ground, spinning her around while she laughed and cried simultaneously. Lily came running over. "What's happening?" she demanded. Ethan crouched to his daughter's level. "How would you feel," he asked gently, "if Claire became part of our family?" "Officially?" Lily's eyes went wide. "You mean like a mom?" Ethan nodded. Lily looked at Claire, studying her seriously. Then she smiled the biggest, brightest smile and launched herself at Claire with enough force to nearly knock her over. "Best birthday present ever," she shouted, and Claire held the little girl tight, feeling the last pieces of her carefully constructed walls crumble completely. They were married quietly 3 months later, just the three of them and a handful of close friends. Lily wore a purple dress with layers of tulle and carried wildflowers. She stood between Claire and Ethan during the ceremony, holding both their hands. And when the officiant asked if anyone objected, Lily announced loudly, "I think it's perfect." The small group laughed, and Claire felt her heart might burst. But the wedding was just the beginning. Claire moved them all into a larger house in the suburbs, with a yard where Lily could play and a garage that Ethan converted into a workshop. She cut back her hours at the company so she could be present for dinner, for bedtime stories, for the 1,000 small moments that made up family life. Ethan took the equipment manager position Claire had offered, but that wasn't enough. In his spare time, he started designing again, drawing up plans for a new type of lightweight helicopter engine, writing papers on propulsion efficiency. Claire encouraged him, reading his drafts, asking questions, pushing him to reach out to his old colleagues. Slowly, tentatively, Ethan began to reclaim the career he'd abandoned. And then Claire had an idea. "What if we started something?" she said one evening. "A program for kids like Lily kids, who are interested in aviation and engineering, but don't have access to that world. We could teach them the basics, show them that these careers are possible." Ethan looked at her, intrigued. "Like a mentorship program?" Claire nodded. "More than that. A full educational initiative. Hands-on workshops, flight lessons for older kids, partnerships with schools. We could use my company's resources and your expertise. Call it." She paused. Skyhope. The name resonated. Skyhope, a program dedicated to lifting up kids who'd been told their dreams were impossible. They spent months developing the curriculum, securing funding, finding a facility. Claire donated the hangar where they'd first met, converting it into a combination classroom, workshop, and flight training center. Ethan designed the courses, breaking down complex engineering concepts into lessons that elementary students could grasp. Lily naturally became their first student and most enthusiastic advocate. The program launched on a crisp fall morning, with 30 children registered. They came from all over the city, kids from underfunded schools, kids from immigrant families, kids who'd never even been on an airplane. Ethan welcomed them with patient enthusiasm, and Claire watched him teach with a pride that made her eyes sting. This was what he'd been meant to do all along. Lily thrived in the program, taking on the unofficial role of teaching assistant. At 7 years old, she was explaining basic aerodynamics to her peers, helping younger children build model planes. The other kids looked up to her not because she was the founder's daughter, but because her passion was genuine and infectious. "I'm going to be an aerospace engineer," she told anyone who asked. "I'm going to design helicopters that never crash." 4 years after the helicopter crash, on a golden afternoon in late summer, Claire stood in the hangar that had become Skyhope's heart. The space was full of children, 50 of them now, ranging from 6 to 16, all working on various projects. Some were building model aircraft. Others were studying navigation charts. A group of teenagers was working on a real helicopter engine under Ethan's supervision. Lily, now 10, was teaching a class of younger children about lift and thrust, using drawings she'd created herself. She looked so much like Ethan, the same intense focus, the same careful hands, but she had Claire's confidence. Claire felt a surge of maternal pride so strong it was almost painful. This brilliant, compassionate child was hers now, officially and completely. Ethan came up beside her, slipping an arm around her waist. He was 41 now, with a few gray threads in his dark hair, but he looked younger than he had that first day in the hangar. The weight of exhaustion and despair had lifted, replaced by purpose and contentment. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly. Claire leaned into him. How far we've come. How impossible this would have seemed 5 years ago. Ethan kissed her temple. You know what I was thinking? That day, you asked me who fixed your helicopter. I was terrified you'd fire me. I thought my life was over. He laughed quietly. Turns out, it was just beginning. Claire turned to face him fully. Mine, too. I thought I had everything figured out, my company, my independence, my carefully controlled life. And then you and Lily crashed into it and turned everything upside down. Best thing that ever happened to me. Lily noticed them watching and waved enthusiastically before returning to her lesson. Claire waved back, her heart full. Should we tell her? Ethan asked. Claire bit her lip, then nodded. They'd been keeping a secret for 2 weeks. Let's wait until we get home. That evening, after dinner, they sat together in the living room, the three of them on the couch, Lily sandwiched between her parents. We have something to tell you, Claire said, taking Lily's hand. The girl looked between them, curious. What? Ethan and Claire exchanged a glance. You're going to be a big sister, Claire said. We're having a baby. For a moment, Lily just stared. Then her face split into the most radiant smile. Really? A real baby? Claire nodded, laughing. Really real. Due in about 6 months. Lily threw her arms around Claire's neck. This is the best news ever. I'm going to teach them everything, how engines work, how to draw helicopters, everything. She pulled back, eyes shining. Can we name them after an aircraft? Ethan groaned, while Claire laughed. We'll think about it, Claire promised diplomatically. Later, after Lily had finally gone to bed, Claire and Ethan stood at their bedroom window, looking out at the dark yard. Are you scared? Claire asked quietly. Ethan considered. A little, he admitted. But mostly I'm grateful. When Lily was born, I was terrified and alone. This time, I have you. We're doing this together. That makes all the difference. Claire rested her head on his shoulder. I'm scared too. I never thought I'd be a mother not like this. But then, I never thought I'd be this happy either. Ethan wrapped his arms around her, one hand settling gently on her stomach. Here's to more surprises, he murmured. Claire smiled. Good surprises. I think we've had enough of the other kind. On a perfect Sunday morning in spring, 5 years after a little girl had pointed to her janitor father and changed everything, Claire Montgomery stood in the hangar beside the helicopter that had brought her family together. The aircraft had been fully restored after the crash, every piece examined and repaired. But they'd kept one small dent on the tail, a reminder of what they'd survived. Ethan was in the pilot's seat today, going through pre-flight checks with methodical precision. Lily sat in the co-pilot position, now 12 years old, and already working toward her junior pilot's license. In the back, strapped carefully into a child seat, was 3-year-old James, dark-haired and curious, already showing signs of his father's analytical mind and his mother's fearless determination. Claire climbed in beside James, buckling herself in and pulling on her headset. Everyone ready? Ethan asked over the comm. A chorus of ready came back. Lily confident, James excited, Claire content. Ethan started the engine, and the familiar sound filled the air. The helicopter lifted smoothly off the ground, rising into the clear blue sky. They flew over the city where Claire had built her empire, over the suburbs where they'd built their home, out toward the mountains where they'd nearly lost everything. But today there was no storm, no danger, just the peaceful sensation of flight, of being suspended between earth and heaven with the people who mattered most. James pressed his face against the window, giggling at the view. Lily pointed out landmarks, explaining to her little brother what everything was called. Ethan flew with steady confidence, and Claire looked at her family, this impossible, miraculous family that had grown from a moment of crisis and a little girl's simple declaration, and felt a peace she'd never known before. She'd spent so many years flying alone, using the sky as an escape from a life that felt hollow despite its success. But somewhere along the way, flight had stopped being about escape and started being about freedom. The freedom to choose connection over isolation. The freedom to build something real with people who saw her, truly saw her, and loved her anyway. Where should we go? Ethan asked through the headset, glancing back at her. Claire looked out at the endless sky, at all the possible directions they could take. "Anywhere," she said, and meant it. "As long as we're together, we can go anywhere." The helicopter banked gently, following the line of the mountains as the morning sun painted everything gold.